I was 3 years old, and I was forcefully removed from my mom's custody. And I remember police coming in. I had my oldest siblings. Some of them were teenagers already, so they were trying to jump out the window. I was freaking out because I don't know what's going on. Everyone's just hysteria. I'm throwing up on this red carpet, and then they just guided me into this white big old van, and then they took us away. And I was all the way in the back, and I was looking out, and it was a rainy day, and I remember my biological mom, standing over there just crying, and we drove off.
Well, I'm really glad you're here. You have a pretty cool story. I don't know all of it, obviously, but I do know quite a bit of it. And I feel like people can benefit from hearing your story and what God's done in your life. I've got to watch you the last 10 years at least. And from where you were when you were 18, you were already a pretty solid guy at 18. But to where you are now, it's pretty cool to watch the whole process. But there's a lot that you had to overcome as a young man.
Yeah, even back then.
Yeah.
You know. Even back then, even though like I know you just said like I was a solid guy there, and like I was brand new to the faith and stuff, but there were still things God was working out of me, and putting in me and molding me, and He's putting the right people at the right time in my life. So
yeah. Well, let's go back to the beginning because you do have a pretty cool story. So walk me through, where were you born, and then walk me through your early childhood.
So I was born in the great state of New York. I lived there till I was 8 years old. But there's a lot of people, and a lot of people that are watching, which is crazy when I say this, but I'm actually the 9th of 12 children. I have 5 brothers and 6 sisters. All 6 sisters are older than me. Then I have my 2 older brothers, and then me, and then the rest of them.
So 12
total.
Wow.
And
what order were you in? Are you the middle? Or are you?
No, I'm like the 9th. So
9th.
Gotcha. Kind of semi middle, I guess. You know. And so I'm 28. Excuse me, sorry. I'm 28, and my oldest sibling I believe is like 41, and then my youngest sibling is 21.
Really?
Yes. So there's that whole gap, and a little background about all that. So the reason why I kind of said like I don't really know like my oldest sibling's age, I said she's kind of, I think 41, is because we don't talk much. And so what happened was when I was 3 years old, and this is like the oldest memory that I have, and it's engraved in my mind like a movie scene. I'll never forget it. So I'm not going to add from it. I'm just tell you how I remember it. I was 3 years old, and I was forcefully removed from my mom's custody. And I remember police coming in. I had my oldest siblings. Some of them were teenagers already, so they were trying to jump out the window. I was freaking out because I don't know what's going on. Everyone's just hysteria. I'm throwing up on this red carpet, and then they just guided me into this white big old van, and then they took us away. And I was all the way in the back, and I was looking out, and it was a rainy day, and I remember my biological mom, standing over there just crying, and we drove off. Wow. Then we got to like some type of home or something, and I remember given a bottle, and then I woke up at someone else's house. Wow. So my biological mother was a drug addict at the time. I'm sorry. Right. My biological mother was a drug addict at the time, and she's actually doing well for herself now. She's, I think, almost 10 years sober, so that's awesome. But it was traumatic. So I was in foster care. Some houses were nice, and some houses weren't. That's all I'll say.
So let me go back though. I don't mean to cut you off, but let me go. Did you? Was your dad in the picture? Did you?
I don't know who my dad is.
So you don't know who your dad is?
Never had a dad in my life.
Really?
I had. So when I finally got adopted, my adopted mom. So I'll call her mom. If I ever speak about my biological mother, I say biological mom. There's no animosity towards her whatsoever. I just never grew up with her, so I don't really have that connection or that kind of like, I'll just call it a connection with her, relationship with her, that I'm like, oh yeah, mom. Like I recognize mentally that she is my biological mother. She brought me into this earth. Yeah. But I never grew up with her. I never had a relationship. We recently, the past year, is when we started connecting and talking over the phone.
Wow. So earlier when you said mom, you were actually referring to your adopted mom.
Yeah. So when I say mom, I'm talking about the one that raised me, my adopted mom. Yeah. And then my biological mom is my biological mom.
Gotcha. Wow. So you've never known your dad.
Never known my dad.
What about your siblings? Are your siblings from the same set of parents?
So we all have the same mother.
Okay.
And then my two oldest sisters have the same dad, and two of my younger brothers have the same dad. And I think two of my middle siblings have the same dad. I'm not sure. But out of all 12 of us, one of my brothers, my second oldest brother, and me were the only ones, I don't know why, that were adopted together. Everyone else went their separate ways. They got some were adopted by their own families or father's side of the family, or aunts and uncles, and then others were still in foster care. And I have a brother who was in foster care all the way up until he was 18, and now he's like 20, and then he's been in shelters. Wow. And then I have another brother who was born with cocaine in the system because my mom was still on drugs, and he can't get his life together. And I think he's the one who's in shelters. But then my other younger brother that I will never forget, I would push him in his stroller when I was little. Unfortunately, he's in a mental institution. So my family's still kind of rough around the edges. Some of them are doing great. Some of them were still, you just got to heal from those scars.
Wow. So you were 3 years old and you were forcibly removed from your biological mom's house.
Yes.
And you woke up in the foster care, basically, at some random person's house. Mm-hmm. So walk me through from that point then. I mean, you were 3, so that's a long time ago. But walk me through what happened after that.
Man, so all I remember is some people not being so nice. And then, but it wasn't for a long time, because still within that same year. So this is 98. Within that same year, I ended up at my mom's house. My adopted mom, my mom.
How'd that happen? She was just looking for foster.
Yeah, that lady is God sent. She couldn't have children of her own, so she's been fostering kids for a long time. Yeah. And so we just ended up in her lap, and she connected with us and loved us as her own. And raised us as her own, and even gave me her middle name, her last name. So I'm Martinez now. I was born Julby, but I'm Martinez now.
I honestly didn't even know that.
Yeah. So So my birth name is Joshua Julby, but after getting adopted, we changed my name to Joshua Martinez. So I love my last name. I take that with pride and just an honor. Yeah. As someone whom I don't come from at all. Said, I love this child. And it kind of like reminds me of the whole God thing. Like we're adopted, and he just takes us in like that. And I was just like, this lady didn't birth me, but this lady gave me everything that I needed in my life. Not everything I wanted, because we didn't grow up, we had no money. So I don't even know how she was able to get us in the first place, because to adopt the child, you have to show financials, all this stuff.
Yeah.
I remember growing up with her, going to the Catholic church down the street. So fun fact about me, I don't like soup, and here's why. So growing up, we didn't have money. We lived on food stamps. We would go to the Catholic church back in New York to get the soup kitchen. And soup every single day. And then we go to the food pantry and we get some food. So not that we were like poor or anything, but like that's how we kind of grew up. And then she was married to her husband at the time. He was very abusive. I'll never forget. He was physically abusive. I'll never forget when he threw her into the bicycle, and the pedal went in her shin, and then he left the house. And to the day that she passed away, she had a scar on her shin.
Wow.
And that was the last time I saw him. Then a few years later, she gets remarried, and this guy was younger than her, but he was also kind of a drunk. And they got married in Ecuador. So my mom's from Ecuador. So I've been to Ecuador several times. Oh. And she brought him to America. And he was working in some factory. So you know how factory workers are, just not rough around the edges, payday, go drink. And so he wanted to go visit his family in Ecuador for 2 weeks. So my brother's like, oh, can I go? And my mom's like, sure. So they went. 2 weeks later, we go to the airport to go pick him up. We only picked up my brother. Guy decided that he'll never come back.
Wow.
So
how old were you?
Jeez, I was in elementary school, fifth grade, fourth grade.
Okay.
So however old you are between those years.
Yeah, I want to say like 9, 10, maybe.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, because I got adopted at officially paper signed everything. I was adopted at 8 years old.
Okay.
But I've been with her since I was 3.
Wow. And so, when were you in New York still? When
I got adopted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you move from New York to Florida?
Basically, like right after.
Okay.
Because I was 8 years old. And then we moved here, and then I started 3rd grade, or here. We're in Ohio. I moved to Florida, and I was in 3rd grade, so I was 8 years old.
Okay. Wow. So you went from I honestly didn't know all this. So 3 years old, forcibly removed from your biological mom's house. You didn't know your dad at all. And then you went to your adopted mom's house eventually through that foster care system. And at 3 years old, you met her.
Yes.
And then from there on, 5 years later, she actually adopts you. But she did not have a lot of money or means. And during that time, she did have different men that came in.
Yeah, just those 2 guys. And, I called them dad, because I'm like, it's my dad, I guess, because he's married to my mom. But they were not examples of what men are and should be and how to be, just a man.
Yeah.
I'm I'm looking for guidance. There's a lot of things a guy needs to learn from his father, and there's things that he needs to learn from his mother, but I always had my mom there, so I wasn't missing in that, but the dad aspect. So they were not good examples. My grandfather, though, who's always lived with me, I call that man my father. My grandfather was my best friend. He, like I said, he passed away 4 months after my mom, but that man taught me things, that.
And was this her dad?
It was her dad.
Her dad. And he always lived there?
He always lived with me since New York.
Okay.
And he was my best friend. That guy, we would stay up late talking. He would tell me they grew up poor.
Okay.
In Ecuador. So my mom's from Ecuador. My grandfather had won like the lottery or something, and that was a plane ticket to America.
Gotcha.
And then he started bringing the family. So he would tell me this story, and I'll never forget. And this is, I'm like, I claim their roots as my roots because that's what I know.
Yeah.
Right. So my grandfather used to be a sheep and goat herder or pastor, whatever you want to call that. And he said, when I was little one time, I was herding the cattle out, and I was so thirsty and there was nothing to drink. We were way out there and I was so thirsty. It was hot. And then he said, but there was a pregnant goat and she was producing milk. So I just latched on and I drank, and then my mom told me, so my grandfather had 6 siblings. One of them is, he has a sister, and she was so young, just a few years older than my mom.
Yeah.
And they grew up like siblings. Even though it was my mom's aunt, it was her like her sister.
Yeah.
So that whole family, there was like 15 people living in a like 1 bedroom in Ecuador. And my mom told me how they had to share diapers because they were cloth diapers. So they had to, whenever they went, her mom cleaned it and then put it back on and stuff like that. So that's the what I know, the family that I grew up with and how I grew up. And yeah, we were in New York and then we moved to Florida and we were still struggling. My mom got a job at a nursery at a church.
Okay.
But we weren't really going to church. That was just her job.
Gotcha. So you weren't. So your adopted mom didn't really raise you in the church at all.
No.
So she wasn't saved. You weren't going to church. So you didn't know about God at all at that point, really?
We went to church because that was her job. She had to go watch the babies.
Yeah.
So then she would take us out and we sit there. So like I've heard all the stories.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've heard all the stories, but it never. I was like, cool. That's cool. That's a cool story. Oh, this guy split the sea. Like, that's awesome. That'll never happen. That didn't happen. It was like cool stories to me,
Yeah.
But I didn't find Jesus till I was 18. Wow. Till I was 18.
So with your mom's background in Ecuador, then living in poverty in the U.S. is probably still different, though, than living. So I would imagine that if that's how you lived in Ecuador or how she lived in Ecuador and your grandfather coming to the U.S. and even living in poverty is probably still much different than
the poverty here compared to Ecuador. They're not poor here, because you still got government assistance here. Like you don't got government assistance.
You don't have food stamps.
You have if you have no money, you have no money.
Yeah.
You better hope someone is nice enough to give you a job, give you food, money, or whatever.
Yeah.
Here you have government assistance.
Gotcha.
Right. So, yeah, it's just a whole different world. So like we would go every single summer for a month to Ecuador, and here we got showers. Even if you have a faulty shower and it's like semi dripping, you still get enough water.
Yeah.
Over there, we'd stay at my aunt's house. There was a barrel outside. She had a shower, didn't work. There was a barrel of water outside, and you had to get a bucket, and then you had the little ladle. So you go, scoop the water, take it to the bathroom. Make sure you get enough water though, and then you lather yourself up, and then you grab the ladle and wash yourself. Now, if you didn't grab enough water though, you got to go back out there, and then everyone's gonna see you. So,
wow,
yeah.
Crazy. Wow. So in Florida, then you guys moved to Florida, and so walk me through that whole process. Your teenage years then.
So that's where now I start coming into I want to say like my consciousness, right? Because my whole years in New York, I was like a baby,
a
little child.
Yeah.
Come to Florida, now I'm starting to grow up, hit preteens, teens, all that. So that's when all I'd say problems started arising. So when I was in 5th grade, my mom had a stroke at the age of 39, and it was the summer of 5th grade going to 6th grade, so I was like 11, 12. My mom had a stroke at the age of 39 that changed her life for the rest of her life. We didn't know she was having a stroke. I remember my brother had gotten in a crazy fight at school. Cops were involved. They were talking about taking him, all this stuff. And so she had to go get him, all this stuff. And so she gets home and she's still angry, and she's cooking, and all of a sudden she starts slurring her speech. Like she goes from talking like you and I to slurring her speech, and we just thought she was being funny. And then she started laughing or whatever, and then then she like urinated on herself. And we're like, what the heck? And then she started laughing, and then she had a bowl, and I'll never forget. She had a bowl in her hand, and she was trying to give it to me. She took a step, fell, bowl in hand, hit her face with the bowl. And at that point, we're like, something's not right. So we call my aunt. We get her in the car. We go to the hospital. And then I feel like things could have went better. But when we got to the hospital, they're asking her questions, but that hospital really wasn't the best. And they're like, well, we can't understand you, so take a seat. So the time frame to administer that certain drugs that help reverse the effects, we lost that window. Now looking back, that I understand that, and my wife's just a nurse, and she explained some things to me. So we lost that window.
Yeah, because when you have a stroke, you do have that window where you can get some medicine.
I think it's like 45 minutes.
Yeah, the quicker you can get that reversed, and sometimes bleeding, I guess.
Yeah, in the brain.
That's the whole thing. But wow, that's crazy.
So we missed that window, and she lost her motor skills. She couldn't speak. She was urinating on herself. She was in the hospital for like 6 months, and then she was in a nursing home for like 9 months. She learned how to walk all over again. She learned how to write, but even to the day that she passed, she couldn't really write normal. It was like a elementary school kid writing.
Yeah.
So she learned.
Where did you live during that time?
My grandfather, he stayed at.
So he was there.
Yeah, so he was with us. But
what about financially? Like, how did you guys pay rent? How did you?
Government assistance.
Okay.
So my mom had leukemia when she was 16.
Okay.
Then she had. No, before she had a stroke. So before she had a stroke, she had the leukemia, and so we were living on government assistance and the money that she was making at the church. And she was making decent money. It was a fairly big church. But when we lost that, the church was still giving us money, and then the family was helping with foods and stuff, so we were able to live.
Gotcha.
And we did still have the food stamps.
Okay, so you had somewhere to live though while she was in nursing.
We had this 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment in Florida.
Yeah, and this was Naples, Florida.
This is Naples, Florida.
Very expensive. So
yeah, but let me tell you what though. In that meantime, I was in. Yep, because I went through. Okay, so that was the summer of going into 6th grade, right? Yeah. While she still was having this stroke and she was still going through all that stuff, the apartment complex that we lived in got sold out, and so they evicted everyone because sold
out meaning new owners,
new owner, LLC, whatever it is, and they evicted and this is like a big apartment complex, like several buildings, like 7 buildings, okay? And they evicted everyone because they destroyed it and they rebuilt. Like if you go to Florida now, it's not the same. It's a whole new, and it's beautiful now. It's some like high-end apartments.
Yeah.
So this was back in 06 to 07. So we had nowhere to go at that point. We were like freaking out, but thank God the low-income housing opened up at these other apartments, and we were able to go there.
Wow.
So it was just like one thing after the next. But what I learned about me is how selfish I was in those moments. Because now, like I said, I'm going into middle school, you know, and then I'm in middle school when my mom had her stroke. So I had to grow up. So I'm 12 years old, learning how to cook, learning how to clean, giving my mom baths.
Really?
What 12-year-old should be seeing his mother naked and literally cleaning her?
Wow.
I did all that. She had diapers because she still, you know, and I had to help her change.
Yeah.
My brother that got adopted with me, he's 5 years older than me. He left the house at 16. Wow. So he went to go live with my aunt, then another aunt, and then he had like a girlfriend, and then he left with her to move to Alabama. So I was like, I had no one. And then my grandfather, when we moved into those new apartment complex, he actually went back to Ecuador because he has a little house over there. And he would go for like half a year.
Okay.
So he left. So then it's just me and my mother.
And were you in school?
I'm in school, man. Wow. I'm in middle school. I'm just starting middle school, like, you know, having all these friends. And what's sad is, you know, I'm having all these friends and their families are, you know, nuclear families. They got mom and dad. I have no dad. Now I barely have a mom because I'm taking care of her. Yeah. And, wow. You know, all their parents are young and healthy and everything. And my mom's here walking with a walker. And so I used to, it's sad to say, but I was embarrassed if I was outside with her and people saw like, oh my God, look at Josh, you know? Yeah. And so I started becoming selfish. I wanted to do me. And yes, I still did what I had to do, you know, but now my mind isn't the mind of a 12-year-old anymore. Yeah. It's not the mind of a 12-year-old because I'm like, I had to grow up.
Like you said, what 12-year-old has to take care of their mom like that, and without a dad in the picture, no nuclear family, and you have to give your mom a bath. Like that's
and then learn how to cook. I'm talking about I never cooked a meal in my life. Never even poured myself cereal, like, you know. Yeah. And then I had to like, okay, now I gotta make myself food, and I gotta take care of my mom, and so now insulin so my mom was a diabetic, so insulin nowadays is pretty cool. They have like this little pen. And it was, if you need to take 10 units, you just 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 10, and then you just inject. Okay. Back in the day, it was just a vial and a syringe, and you had to know the math on the sliding scale. So I had to poke her finger, know her sugar levels, and then use the sliding scale, and then get the right amount. So I have, you know, pulling the syringe out, doing all that, injecting her in her stomach or leg. You know, so.
That's, wow. So you were 12 or so going through all that, and then so your teenagers, and you know, you say, you know, you were selfish, but I mean, what teenager isn't at that point? Yeah. I mean, but so through your teenage years, you're taking care of your mom and all of that, and then you said you met Christ at 18. So walk me through that, because that's pretty cool.
So real quick, the way I was selfish is, so those are like my preteen years, preteen and beginning of teen in middle school. Then I hit high school. Started playing football, started getting bigger and growing into my body. People are noticing who Josh is. They're like, oh, Josh, he's big. He's good at this. He's good at that. Yeah. And that got to my head. And then I get invited to parties. I get all to do all this stuff, but I still got to take care of my mom. So I did the bare minimum, and then I would like sneak out. Okay. And then my mom, I will never forget this, and I hate it. I hate this memory. I came home from practice one day. I'm beat. You know, because I'm school all day. You know, you got to get up early for high school. And then practice right after. You get home like 6, 7 o'clock. Yeah. Then my mom comes up, Josh, I need to talk to you. I was like, what? She's like, I need to, and I'm still walking. She's trying to talk to me. And she's like, I need to talk to you. And angrily, I go, what? And she says, I have cancer. I have breast cancer. You know what my response was? I busted out laughing. I was like, you'll be fine. Just pray about it. And I went to my room.
Really?
Because I didn't know what to do. I was like, when is this going to stop? it's one thing after the next with her, you know. And I'm like, I'm exhausted because like at the same time I want to live my life, but I'm taking care of her. Wow. And I'll never forget. I'm in my my room, and I hear her crying in the living room. Oh man, dude. So this is like when I acknowledged God for the first time. I was like, if you are real and what the things in this Bible says are true, that you are a healer, then you need to heal her. Because we've gone through thing after thing after thing. And that was like the beginning of like, where I'm like, I'm acknowledging God.
Yeah.
I'm acknowledging what he can do. You know, I was like, I don't know, but if these things are true, and the Bible says you're a healer, and you know everything, heal her. I didn't know how to pray. That's just how I said it. Like I was just talking to him. I was like, you got to do it. And I'm just in my room, and I'm crying too. I'm like, I don't know what to do. How do I come for that? You know. Wow. So I go through high school, and I'll say high school was a ride through hell. I'll say that. I'll say a ride because, you know, I'm living life, having fun. But it was through hell because I did some things that I'm not proud of. Yeah. And I don't ever want to go back. I don't like reminiscing about those things. But it was through those things where that first moment where I acknowledged God, I started seeing like crazy things happen. Like God might be real.
Yeah.
Like little things. Like I almost died. I almost drowned. Okay, because I'm with my friends. We're hanging out at the pool. We're drinking all stuff, and I hit my head. I slipped, and I almost drowned. But luckily, my friends were there. But even then, I was like, I don't know. I was at the right place at the right time to get saved. I was driving my car, and I was just, you know, normal turn, nothing crazy. I'm just turning, and my tire blew out, spun me out. I hopped across the median into oncoming traffic, and cars are coming.
Yeah.
I had given up on life right there in that moment. The cars were fastly approaching. And all I remember, this is the second time that I really acknowledged God again.
Yeah.
I see the cars coming. My car wouldn't start. I'm perpendicular in the road. Cars are coming. I looked out the window. And then I looked up, calm as can be, but giving up. And I said, forgive me. Yeah. I gave up on life. I'm like, I'm going to die right now. I'm going to get hit. I'm going to die. But I was calm as can be, and I just said, forgive me.
Yeah.
And then something just clicked at me. I was like, hold on, let me just try it one more time. Car started again. I was like, and I was able to get across to the road into a safe place. And then I busted out crying. Like, I was like, I freaked myself out because I gave up on life.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, this is it. I already lived my life. I've done so much. I'm tired. I'm done. But I was super calm about it. But when I got safe, I realized I was like, what is wrong with me?
So how did you get saved? Like, what? Walk me through.
So after high school, so there's this thing called Young Life in high school. And they do like little things like during lunch, a guy will come in and speak about God. Like, you know, they'll have like a room and you can go if you want to. So I would go because it's for like athletes and stuff. So I would go and I would hear and I'm like, oh, I don't know. But they had these camps too. So I went to these camps and they were fun. And then they talk about God. So bits and pieces. And I remember, so after high school, I was at a party. I was 18. I was at a day party. And we're drinking. It was going crazy. I was tipsy. And I was like, you know what? I need to go home. Yeah. And I drove home. Thank God I made it safely. And I got home and I walk into my room. And as soon as I walked into my room, I kid you not, sober. Like no tipsiness, no nothing. Just immediate. And then depression. Such a heavy, heavy depression. And I sat there crying like no one cares about me. See, because I was like, I just slipped out of that party. And no one asked me, hey, where are you going? No one's texted me. No one's asking me what I'm doing. Yeah. No one cares. And I started going through this thing in my mind, like no one cares about me. I'm going to die. And early on in middle school, I had read these two books from Mary Kay Baxter called A Divine Revelation of Heaven. And another one was A Divine Revelation of Hell, where God took her spirit and sent her to hell for 7 days to truly experience. And the things that I read in that book, I don't think anyone in the sane mind could just make those up. You know?
Never heard of those. It's interesting.
Yeah. And he took her soul and then sent her to heaven for like 4 days.
Okay.
So she experienced hell, but then right after she experienced heaven. And she wrote some things in there, and I was like, in that moment when I'm all depressed and crying and saying like nothing cares about me, no one cares about me, I started thinking about that book of the hell, Divine Revelation of Hell, and how the things that she described. And then I started thinking about the word eternity, because in that book she says that she was going through hell, and there was a cell where it said BC, like before Christ. I know that they changed the thing now, like before Common Era now, but anyways, BC, so before Christ. So this person has been in hell since before Jesus was born. And so then I started thinking about the word eternity, and I started breaking it down. Like, what does that mean? Forever. What does forever mean? It's not going to stop. What does that mean? It's going to keep going and going and going. And I said it out loud. I'm going to hell for an eternity. It's never going to stop. And when I said that, such a fear crept into my room. I'm telling you, this is the middle of the day. Sun's high in the sky. Yeah. And I was so unbelievably terrified. I popped up. I turned on my light, opened up the blind. I was trying to get light in, you know what I'm saying? Because I was home alone. And I remember I had a friend, DJ. He would always, we went to middle school together.
The DJ I know?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And we went to middle school together. He wasn't saved, like when we were in middle school and high school.
Yeah.
And then like we had randomly like met up, and he's like saved and going to church and really like preaching Jesus. And he kept inviting me to go to church. I was like, no. I was like, dude, I know you. Like we used to hang out and do the same bad things. He's like, no, that's the old me. And he would always invite me to church. But in that moment when I was scared, I called him. I said, dude, I want to accept your offer. I don't care, rain, hail, thunderstorm, tornado, hurricane. Take me to church with you. And I believe it was August 23rd of 2013 where I got saved. Wow. And my life has been so different since. Yeah. But it hasn't been easy. Even like, 'cause there's this misconception where people think, oh, you're saved, it's going to be great. It actually wasn't great the first couple of years. It was like harder than ever before. We're talking about lust. We're talking about partying. We're talking about drinking. All these things like came even harder. But I'm like, I'm saved now. Why is this happening?
The reality is, when you meet Jesus, you become convicted of that lifestyle you were living. Yeah. And once you understand your sin, you actually acknowledge the sin, you become so much more aware of it. Yeah. And it does make it so much worse, because then you start fighting it. And then when you start fighting it, it gets worse. Yeah. So but when you're not, before you know Jesus, you're living that way, and there's no consequences. You don't really realize it's wrong. In that muck. Yeah, and it's one of those things where, and there are consequences, but you just don't know what's happening. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of float through all that. Yeah. So once you meet Jesus, you get convicted of that sin, and that's where you know all that. So it's interesting. There was a time where I met up with a friend of mine, and we were friends for like a solid 5 years, like really good friends, her and I. Yeah. And I was like, hey, you're in town, because she went to Florida State. Hey, shout out Florida State. And I'm telling you, like, we were like basically siblings. Yeah. Okay, that we were that close. And she was in town. I was like, hey, let's go grab some ice cream at Cold Stone. She's like, cool. So we're sitting there, we're chit-chatting, and she kept saying, what? I can't hear you. What? And so then I say, what, are you deaf? Like, just jokingly, because I was getting irritated, but still joking. And she goes, yeah, I don't have my hearing aids in. I was like, shut up. You know, she's like, no, seriously. I was like, how? You don't wear hearing aids. You're not deaf. She's like, yes. And she showed me her card. She's legally deaf. I'm like, we were friends for 5 years, and you never bothered telling me that? She's like, because it's not an issue to me. I normally am able to read lips, but you're mumbling. So I felt so bad. And she told me these words. She said, when I was in 3rd grade, I was diagnosed with a hearing disability and a learning disability that I'll never pass the 3rd grade education. Wow. And she said, I did not want to be another statistic. Wow. And I'll remember that to this day. Don't want to be another statistic.
I don't want to be another statistic. And so throughout my life, the things that I went through, like in New York, I grew up in the projects. I remember my next door neighbor got stabbed. There was a shootout drive-by in the houses right across the street. I was bullied throughout my whole life. I'm talking about beat up, bullied, jumped, bullied every single day in New York, always coming home with black eyes. And even in Florida, I got bullied all up until like 7th grade. And then just, the drugs and everything, the no father. And then I see like my siblings that were separated from us. Some of them are not doing so good.
Yeah.
And then I know other people who live like in certain places, like friends of mine that are not doing so good.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to grow up and be a druggie. I don't want to grow up and go to jail. I don't want that. And I was like, I don't want to be another statistic. And yeah, I was saved and I was still struggling, right? Because like you said, now you come to the full consciousness of sin.
Yeah.
And so I'm fighting all those battles, and I'm like, God, help me. Like, I know I want to be a father. I want to be a present dad. I want to be a husband. I want to be a working class citizen. I want to have all these things. And I was like, God, help me. And throughout my life from 18 till now, I'm 28. God has placed people in my life at every moment to share knowledge or guide me back into the right direction or steer me right, So before I actually got saved in high school, there was a Corporal Mel Gonzalez. I'll never forget him. Mel Gonzalez. I think he's like a sergeant now or something. But anyways, hey, if you're watching this, Corporal Mel Gonzalez, you really steered me into the right direction. I was having some hard times in high school. They helped pay for my my suit to go to prom because we had no money.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I can't go. They helped gather money for that. And then Corporal Mel Gonzalez, he was like just teaching me, and showing, yeah, he was a cop and yeah, I was a crazy student, whatever, but he was like a loving person. And he invited me to church and he would pick me up or I would drive to his house and we'd go to church together. So that's like, those are the pre-things. But so I didn't want to be another statistic, and God was putting people in my life. And the Bible says, like, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And now when I teach people or I coach or mentor or when I run into younger people or even older people, I say, hey, knowledge is power. So those people, those kids that are living in the ghetto and they say, I know nothing. This is all I know, how to sell drugs. I was like, no, that's what you know now. Go gain knowledge. Go to the library. Grab a book. Go to the library, grab a computer, go on YouTube, learn something. Because this is what you know now. So go gain knowledge and get out of your situation, like Dr. Ben Carson, And so that's what I preach to people. And people have done that with me.
Yeah.
I've been able to sit with millionaires and with people not so well.
Yeah.
And I learned things from everyone in between.
Yeah.
So
you at 18 then or so got motivated at that point to say, okay, I didn't have a dad, didn't have a nuclear family, grew up very poor, all of these things, but you don't want to become, because those things do set up people for failure. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can see across our country, across the world, no nuclear family, no dad, poor. I mean, all these circumstances do point to usually not a so successful life.
Yeah.
And so knowing that you had the odds stacked against you to become one of those statistics.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look at it's unfortunate, but like if you look at the people who are in jail and their backgrounds, no father. That's like the main thing, like no fathers, and then where they lived and stuff. But one of my older sisters, she actually went to Ivy League school. She graduated valedictorian of her school.
Wow.
She went to an Ivy League school, and she worked at Brooklyn Hospital. Now she is the some very high up position at Miami Hospital, in Miami University or whatever, all the way down there. And I remember when I was in middle school one day talking to her, and I was complaining, oh, my life sucks. My life is this, and that. She's like, we were in the same boat. What is your excuse? Like, give me a real excuse, because all I hear is complaints, and you're just making these dumb excuses of why you can't. Because we were in the same boat. Yeah. She's like, yeah, I'm older than you, but so that means I lived longer than you in that muck. Yeah. And I got out of it. Ivy League school, did all this stuff. Yeah. What is your excuse? And then years later, my friend says, I don't want to be a statistic. Those things have been my driving force. Those words have been my driving force. So 18, my mom's still here on earth, still taking care of her, because like I said, that stroke changed her life. Yeah. So I'm still cooking, still doing all these things. Now I got jobs. I'm handling jobs. I did a discipleship program, a 9-month discipleship program at the church where I got saved at. So it was now we started building a foundation.
And that's when I met you.
Yeah, and that's when I met you. Literally, when I joined, you came right after. Yeah. So then we were building a relationship. Yeah. And so then I went to Haiti, mission trips, I'm learning things about God and about life. And another pivotal moment is in my life and journey and my hunger to do great is when we went to Haiti, there was this lady. Man, we were like in the middle of a desert or something. I don't know. But this lady, she lived in this little mud hut. There was a hole in the ceiling, and she had knees the size of like soccer balls, man. And her legs were going like opposite ways, and she walked with sticks. And we had just come from picking up some rice and water and stuff, some food. And she had 3 little minnows in a frying pan. This was like 10 o'clock in the day, okay, in the morning. And she had like 3 minnows, little minnows, so Florida peeps, that she was going to eat for the day. And then she's like, I'm going to die after this. Like, the lady had probably like 3 teeth left in her mouth. But she had the most beautiful smile I've ever seen. And she would say, Ale Jezi, like, praise Jesus. And in my mind, I'm like, what are you so happy about? Because you're about to die. And she's like, thank you, Jesus. Praise Jesus. I was like, why? She's like, because they sent me you. Huh. And I was like, you're living in all this. You're so happy, even with your 3 little minnows. You didn't even know we had food. You just said, I'm glad you guys are here. Not because she didn't say, I'm glad you guys are here because you're giving me food. She said, I'm just glad you guys are here. Yeah. And needless to say, we have all the food and stuff, and we gave it to her, and we were able to, add life to her, And I see that stuff, and I was like, what is my excuse living in America?
Yeah.
So I came back here, and something clicked, man. I had 2 jobs. I was working as a food runner, and actually a food runner and a busboy, 2 different 2 different restaurants. And then I got a job as a phlebotomist, and then I went back to school, still taking care of my mother, failed out of nursing school because I was in nursing school. 6 months left, failed out because we were living off of, now my mom had disability because of her stroke. So we were receiving a disability check and a social security, her social security disability check and a check for adopting me because she got $1,000 a month. So we had a total of $1,733, $1,733 that was coming in. And the 1,000 was for me. The 733 was for her social. And our rent at that time was $1,000.
Which is crazy. That's government assisted rent.
Yeah. And so
in Naples, but yeah.
The stipulation with that was she'll receive that money until I'm 18 and not in school, or until I'm 21 and still in school.
Gotcha.
Well, I decided to go back to school at the age of like 20 and a half to nursing school. And then so I hit 21, 6 months left to nursing school. I would have been an LPN because that's what I was going for. I kid you not, they were so quick with that. The day I turned 21, we got a letter in the mail saying no more money. So we couldn't live. So I had to pick up all 3 shifts, first shift, second shift, and third shift in the same week. I was tired. I was exhausted. But I was like, I'm not going to let my mom go without anything. And I ended up failing out of nursing school.
Gotcha.
So I was like, well, I'll just keep working. And God still provided. We almost got evicted once. Had a letter on the door. Didn't know about that letter because there was a prayer night at church. Go to church. I'm praying. I'm like, God, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. But you're the provider. I'm giving it to you. Like, you're the provider. I can't. You know what I'm going to pray about? I'm just going to worship you. I already told you I need help and guidance, so now I'm going to praise you. Yeah. Guy comes up to me. Hey, Josh, can I speak to you for a second? I was like, yeah, what's up? He's like, this whole week you've been on my mind, and I don't know why. So I just started praying for you, and God told me to give you this. He gives me an envelope. I was like, what the heck is this? Open, it's $500. And I'm just like, what? Yeah. And so I'm like, I didn't even cry. I was just like happy. I was like, oh, cool. Like, I got extra money, some gas money. That's how I was thinking. About 5 minutes later, I get a phone call from my mom. She's bawling her eyes out. We're getting evicted. I said, what? We owe them $500. I said, how much did you say? She's like, we owe them $500. We have no money. I said, I'll be right there. Went straight to the office. Here's $500. Wow. Like, God knew the exact amount.
Yeah. So every step of the way so far, God somehow or another opened a door for you or made a way, and even the little things for you, which is absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. So then you're 18 years old. through 21, 22?
23 is when I
23?
moved.
Okay, then you moved to Tennessee. Why did you move to Tennessee?
I had opportunity for schooling and some free housing there.
Yeah. Oh, before you moved, though, did you meet someone special?
My now wife? Your sister?
Yeah, you met Hannah at
church.
the discipleship program, because she
Yeah.
went from Ohio to Florida, because I was working at the church there, and she went from Ohio to Florida to do the discipleship program as well, and just so happened to meet you there, which is
I just happened to be there.
Yeah.
It's like, you come here often? No. Which is crazy because I was doing so good, like with God, and I was just like focusing. I'm not focusing on anything else. And then here comes this woman, and I kid you not, on our very first conversation, I said, I'm going to marry this girl.
Yeah.
And then we were together for 5 years before we got married.
Yeah.
But from that very first conversation. So anyways, Hurricane Irma happened. And she, everyone was evacuating. So she evacuated back to Ohio. And I ended up staying here. I was like, really? No, I'm just kidding. She ended up staying here. And then she started nursing school. And then I had the opportunity to go to Nashville. Had some free housing. My friends' parents and great mentors of mine, they had 10 kids. Yeah. And they still allowed me to join their house. And, they were living in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment at the time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so, I was sleeping on the floor for a little bit. It's okay. They were amazing. And so I lived there for 6 months. And
that's when you worked for the Titans?
That's when I worked for the Titans. I met Marcus, Mariota, Delaney, those people. It was cool. And the goal there was, okay, go to school, get my mom up here. There's so many hospitals, great hospitals. And then Father's Day of 2018, I said goodnight to her. 7 o'clock, and then Monday morning, I wake up at 9 a.m. to a phone call from my uncle, and he was calm at first. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was like, "I was sleeping," and then he lost it. He's like, "Did you know your mom died last night?" And I said, "What? I'm just waking up," and I didn't know what to do. I was like running up and down the stairs. My mom died, and then 3 days from exactly 4 months later, my grandfather died. But before my grandfather died, after my mom passed away, 2 weeks later, I moved to Ohio because I was like, I have nothing over here. I don't have family. My goal is busted. Like I don't know. I lost my vision. I had my goal and vision was to bring her up there, and I was like, well, I do know I want to marry this girl, and she's in Ohio, and I want to continue working on our relationship. So then I moved here, and again, everything that I owned fit in my car. Hyundai Accent, 2016, small little tiny vehicle. I had nothing.
And you, this whole time though, one thing is that, obviously I got to watch this all happen.
Yeah.
One observation that I had for a lot of your life was lack of support, because you didn't really have a nuclear family. You didn't have people you could turn to. Like my whole life,
or financial support or anything.
I'm pretty spoiled. I have a wonderful nuclear family. I have a lot of family.
You have an amazing family.
Yeah, I do. And I've been blessed that way. And so I went from Ohio to Florida. I didn't have family in Florida, but when I was there, I still had my nuclear family that was there for me. And so you went from Florida to Tennessee really with no nuclear family.
Nothing.
And having friends is one thing, which you did. You had people there, but it's not family.
Yeah.
And then you went from Tennessee to Ohio and took a risk because you guys weren't engaged. There was other situations happening, and then you're going to a place where there's uncertainty.
Yeah.
Like if you guys don't make it, then you're really like you had no one then.
Yeah. You want to talk about trusting God? That's it. I said, hey, you call me upon the waters. Tell me to walk. All I knew is I want to be closer to this woman. Yeah. And I eventually marry her. That's all I knew. Yeah. And I love Jesus, and she loves Jesus. Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to do what I know how to do. That's work. Yeah. So I came over here, got a job, started working. I lived with a buddy of mine for a month because he was getting married. But he was like, hey, I'm getting married. Like, I can only give you a month, which is fine. I'm not his child. Yeah. And I had to, kick it in high gear, and I got a job. And then I got my own place, own apartment. Yeah. Had absolutely nothing but a beach chair, those little plastic drawers, Yeah. I put my TV on top of it, and the drawers were like scrunching, and I had an air mattress. I had like 3 of them because they keep popping until I was able to afford a bed. That's all I had in that entire house. Yeah. But hey, it was mine. It was my apartment. I
remember that apartment.
But I always had this goal of buying a house. My entire life, I've lived in an apartment. I don't know what it's like to live in a house. And I got my own apartment. Yeah, it was mine. Hey, I'm living on my own, cool. But I was like, I want a house. And
you had a good job at this point.
oh, I had at the time, you know, the economy was booming and I had a great job. I mean, at the time, $19 an hour was a lot back then, you know, it was only a couple of years ago. But I was making some money, overtime, double time, all this stuff. And then
and Ohio has actual affordable housing.
yeah, and so that's the thing about moving here. A lot of my dreams I've been able to achieve by living here, you know, by the affordable housing and all this other stuff too. I went back to school. I got my degree. I'm still in school right now. And I'm probably going to go back to school because I want my master's degree. But my drive, my wife, I knew that I wanted to be a man. I wanted to be a husband, a provider. The Bible says we're the priest of our homes. Yeah. Now, I'm not a dictator of the home. You know, she went to school. She's not my slave. She wants to work. Hey, go ahead and work. Yeah. But if she ever comes to me and says, hey, I want to be a stay-at-home mom and take care of the kids, I'm also going to say, okay, I'm going to go out and hunt. And that's what we're supposed to do. Yeah. That's my belief. And so, but I didn't have anything. I was just living in that apartment with nothing. And this woman, we were dating while I was in Tennessee doing long distance and in Florida long distance. She stayed with me. She saw me go through all this stuff, the death of my mom, the transition, the different states. She stayed with me. Yeah. And then, so I moved here 2 weeks after my mom passed. 3 days from exactly 4 months later, my grandfather passed. It was 11 o'clock at night. I get a phone call from my cousin, and we don't really talk on the phone like that. Yeah. So I already knew. And so I said, did it happen? She said, yeah. I said, okay, I love you. I'll see you. My grandfather passed away. My best friend, and my girlfriend, who's not my wife, saw me go through that. Yeah. And was still through me. And then I went through this depression, and she was still through me. And she had me, like, guided me towards counseling. And but through all that, I get through counseling and everything. And my mindset is, I know I want to marry her soon. But what can I give her? I don't have an education. Yeah, I can work. Yeah, you know. But I want to provide her with the things, like, with everything, you know. So I worked hard. I said, I'm going to buy a house in 6 months.
Now, I remember that.
Yeah. But here's the crazy part is they always say have a vision, write it down, make it plain. I had this dry erase board. And I put it up there. And I said, buy a house in 6 months. I looked at my bank account. I had $400. No savings, no nothing. Everything's flat. I promise you, all it was $400 in my checking account. How am I going to buy a house in 6 months? I bought a house in 6 months. So, unfortunately, what happened was COVID. Yeah. So I was working at a paint manufacturing plant, and I was like, "Man, it's paint. That's not a essential job. Like we're gonna be shut down." Nope. You think about everyone's at home. Let's finish our projects. So we need that paint. So we stayed in business. So we worked 7 days a week, 12 hours a day.
Yeah, everybody's at home painting their houses and doing all these home improvement projects. Yeah. So paint was a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was mandatory 7 days, Monday through Sunday. Wow. So the days started blending. I had no idea what it was. So Monday through Saturday was, mandatory, and as well as Sunday. But because it was mandatory, once you hit, obviously you get overtime. Yeah. Once you hit Sunday, though, you work Sunday, it's double time. That was like a mandatory double time thing. So I was like, okay, but like I was getting tired of making money, and that because I was just tired. But every time I get home, I see that and said buy a house 6 months. I almost gave up on searching because I couldn't find homes and they weren't in safe places. Then there was a home across. You called me. You were like, hey, they're selling this house right now. They're doing an open house. Yeah. And I literally had just given up. I texted my realtor and I was like, hey, I'm done. I'm just going to wait like another year.
Well, it was during that boom. Like the housing market had boomed because interest rates went to an all-time low. Oh, yeah. Inventory was nothing. And in Ohio, you can find cheap houses. Like where we live, where I still live now, it's a cheap neighborhood. It's a safe neighborhood because it's a lot of Ford workers that have retired, and it's a safe neighborhood. And well, anyways, I remember I was working from home at the time with my business. And where I was sitting, I could see the neighbor's house across the street because my desk, I put it right up against the window. Yeah. And I'm seeing all these people just visiting that house. And I'm like, what's going on? But there was no for sale sign in the yard. So they hadn't listed it yet. Yeah. And so I was like, this has got to be, like, there's something's going on. Yeah. And so I remember calling you and I was like, you got to call your realtor right now and figure this out.
Well, and what's crazy about that is I literally just texted her saying, hey, like, I give up. Yeah. And then you call, and then I was like, okay. what I'm like right around the corner. So I was like, hey, realtor lady, like, can we just try this?
Yeah.
Perfect spot. Like you said, great neighborhood. Love the neighborhood. Hannah, my wife, when we lived there, like she felt safe. She would walk the dog out by herself. Everyone knew everyone, and everything in the house was already done. It was remodeled, everything.
And they're cheap.
And I got that house for $106,000. And it was a nice house.
So you had
it
was multiple offers. Remember, it was for sale by owner.
Oh, I did not have the highest offer either.
Yeah.
I did not have the
highest.
highest.
Like 20 offers or something came in on that?
And I wrote him a letter, the owner, and he literally said, hey, you are not even closely by the highest bidder. But I know what it's like to be a first-time homeowner and a father, I wasn't a father at the time, a husband.
Yeah.
And he gave us the house.
Yeah.
So now I'm a homeowner. Well, at the time I'm still not single. I'm still dating my wife, but now I'm like, there's one piece of the puzzle. Yeah. I have a house that I can give to her.
That was a huge moment when you got that house.
Oh, I cried.
That was super cool.
I never owned a house. I never lived in a house, and so when I put my TV on the wall, I hung it on the wall. The first hole that I made in the wall, I stopped and I busted out crying because I was like, this is mine. No one's going to tell me I can do this. I can make a hole and leave it there if I wanted to. So I did that. Then I got my degree. And then I got an even better job. And I had to propose to my wife. She said yes. And then I got married to her. And so I had the degree. I had the house. I had the wife. I got a dog in between all that. So it helped me out of the depression. Beautiful dog. And then we get back from the honeymoon. About 3 weeks later, she's pregnant. So now I was like, oh my, I'm gonna be a father. Something that I always dreamed of. I've never had one, so I don't know what it's like to be a father. So during this whole pregnancy phase, I'm reading books after books, but then I just went back to the Bible too. Like, I don't know how to really be a father. Like, everyone has their own opinion on how to raise, and it's fine. But I want to raise them in a godly manner. Yeah. I'm like, God, help me. I never had it. And even like my grandfather, as much as I love him, he wasn't a godly man. I love my grandfather, but I was like, I want to raise him the right way. Yeah. So I just prayed and just seek him to this day, because now this kid's running around. So then Hannah gives birth, right? We lived in that house together about 6 months or so, 9 months, because obviously she's 9 months pregnant. So about 9 months. And 2 weeks after my son was born, bought a new house, a bigger house, which again was favor from God. Because the price point where it was at, but it had everything that we were praying for and that we wanted. It had 2 living rooms, the amount of square footage, the yard, everything.
And at this point, Hannah had graduated as well.
And she's working as a nurse. Yeah. She works at ICU. And she's high level stress, but loving woman. And we prayed, and again, we had given up on that house. So God has been showing his faithfulness throughout my life at this point, and yet I'm still giving up and not really going to him first before I give up. And then I remember one night we just prayed for it. And I said, because there was a stipulation. He said the owner of that house said he'll accept my offer if we can sell our house in 7 days. So in 6 days we sold our house. So I was like, what just happened? We saw that house, then we were unsure about it on day 2. Day 3, we put in an offer, and then he said what he said. Day 4, we had an offer on our house. Day 5, they backed out. Day 6, we had an offer and like we committed to it on day 6. And day 7, we were like, all right, this is it. Yeah. So literally in 6-7 days, really, we bought a house and sold a house, and it's way bigger than like 2.5.
And that house is right down the road from her parents.
So Hannah, my wife, grew up on that road. You grew up on that road, yeah. You grew up on that road, and it's literally like 6 houses down is your parents' house. And so now, like Grammy, I call her Grammy. Grammy lives down the road. So, unfortunately, I don't have parents, so my son doesn't have grandparents from my end, but he has Grammy and Grampy right down the road from your guys' side, and the amount of love that they show him. And so, like, I'm just like, everything that I ever dreamed of, that I prayed of, that I missed in my life, I didn't have a father. I always said I want to be a father. I told my brother, be the father that you never had. Like, what does that look like? Yeah. I found Jesus. So now I'm trying to be a godly man and father and leading and guiding my family in the right direction.
Yeah.
You know, with loving and peace and kindness and patience. My son is amazing. He's showing me a new type of love that I never even could imagine. And if that's my own blood, I go back to thinking about my mom. I love my son unconditionally. He's my blood. How did she love me? And I was not her blood.
Yeah.
So it's just those crazy moments in life. Like, it sucked in the beginning. There's no way to say it. Like, I felt abandoned. I was lonely a long time. A lot of the times, I felt like no one cared about me. I had to grow up. I missed like childhood phase, you know, because I had to do things for you know, like adults do, you know.
Yeah.
And God just continuously favor. And so like even now I'm like, God, forgive me the times where I give up. I'm not gonna give up anymore. I'm gonna come to you now. If you say no, that's a different story. But now like I am the man that I wanted to be, but now I want more. In a sense, like, okay, how am I gonna the next phase of my son's life? How, like, when he starts talking and showing his character, how do I have those hard conversations with my son and like learning to do that? It's easy. My son's he's only 11 months, but I'm like, it's easy right now because he doesn't talk. You know, all I got to do is feed him and keep him entertained, right? And change him. But when he gets to those next phase, when he has those questions that no one was there to give me answers, right? Like your body starts changing, or you had a hard time at school, or the bullying part. Like my mom was just upset. She would talk to the principal and everything, but like she didn't tell me, like, and explain to me about bullies and stuff. Like those moments that I had no one to explain those things to me. Like, how am I going to do that? And how do I respond correctly in a graceful, loving manner to my son whenever and if ever he has those questions? And
you have the opportunity to raise him in the faith and actually show him who Jesus is at an early age and actually introduce him to God. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity that he has that you didn't have. You know, you still found God. Well, God found you. And, you know, but you have an opportunity with Lucas to actually do that. And it's incredible. And I will say, I've got to watch the whole thing. And, you know, obviously I'm very connected. It's my sister. You are an incredible father. Like it's really cool. You actually change the diapers. You're always present with him. Like it's really cool. You're a great father. And knowing that you don't have that example, you know, you don't have someone that was there for you. You turn around and take that through God's love and then show your son that. It's pretty beautiful. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
It's funny because so when Kobe Bryant passed away, all these documentaries and everything came out, right? And he's like, oh, I got the Mamba mentality. And I remember I was sitting with your mom, and I was like, man, I wish I had a Kobe Bryant in my life. And she said, remember, Kobe Bryant had to be Kobe Bryant for Kobe Bryant. So he had to be the example for himself. So that's why he had that mentality. And I was like, that was pretty sick how you said that. But I was like, all right, I gotta be the father for my son. Yeah. But I go to the father, and the greatest thing about all of this, like, my whole story, because I every time, like almost every day, I have a moment of reflection of my whole life. I basically cry every day, you know, because I know it's not by my own strength.
Yeah,
man, the muck that I've come out of, it wasn't by my own strength. God, number one, had his hand over my life. He's always had a plan and a purpose for my life. Two, he met me where I was and didn't force me to change. I still got saved, but I was still drinking, still doing all this stuff. I was saved, and he didn't turn me away. He's like, I still love you, but I had this hunger to know more of God, that the more I got to know him and closer I got with him, the old me just started shedding off. Yeah. And it's like, he loves me for who I am, knowing who I'm supposed to be. Yeah. You know, because he saw who he made. He's like, I didn't make all that dirtiness. I see the gold in you, and I'm going to call that out of you. Yeah. I'm going to bring it forth. And so through the refining, through walking with him and getting closer to him, I was able to meet all my goals and do all these things by his strength, but he never forced me to change. I was like, I want to know more of you, and this I can't do that. It's like, that's not who I am. I don't like it. So like he just met me where I was.
Yeah.
When I was at that party and I got home and I got depressed and I got scared, he met me there. On August 23rd, he met me there, you know? And the moments when I was sleeping on the floor, he met me there. The moment when all my clothes and everything I owned fit in my car, he met me there. The moment when I was going through depression, he met me there. He's always been there in those moments and just be able to guide me and transform my heart. And now I am where I am. I love my life. I wouldn't change a single thing of anything that I went through. Because of all that, I am who I am and I'm where I'm at.
Yeah.
I have a beautiful, amazing wife, amazing son, amazing life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely incredible. And, you know, as cheesy as it sounds, God being the way maker, it's so true.
Yes.
That's why this is called what it is. Because truly he is the way maker. Jesus made the ultimate way, first and foremost, for us to have salvation. But then every one of those things you mentioned, it's God making a way in your life when you could have been a statistic.
Yep.
And most people that grow up that way do end up that way because you tend to repeat the cycle. And God broke that cycle in you.
Yeah.
And you are the first then to say, nope, you went to college, you have a wife, you have a house, you have a son, and you broke that cycle. God did.
Yeah.
And it's so incredible to hear that story. And I hope that anyone who hears this is encouraged by that, to know that there is a way out of that mess. There is a way if you turn to God. Like how would you know how to be a good father? The only way you can
It's through God.
is through God.
Because I didn't have that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, even people who had a father, the real love comes from God, knowing how to love somebody. You can't really truly know how to love somebody unconditionally outside of God's definition of love.
Yeah.
And that's how we learn that. But you didn't even have the earthly definition of a father.
Yeah.
And so for you had no choice here.
Yeah.
You learned that from God.
So-
and you have.
Like, I keep going back to my mom because I didn't have a father. And I say this again. I was adopted by this woman. I'm not her blood. I'm nothing to her. She loved me as if I was her blood. I am her blood. God, we come from God. When we're away from God, like he's like, no, I'm calling you forth still, you know, and he still loves us when we're dirty.
Yeah.
He still loves us so fervently when we're dirty. But when we turn to him and go through the way that he's made, that path, he's like, I've never not loved you.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm just thankful. He made a way. He was definitely the way maker in my life. And I'm thankful for it.
Yeah.
Every time he met me in that road.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, I really appreciate you being here, sharing your story. I know it's not easy. There's a lot there, but I really hope and pray that people are blessed by your story. I know they will be.
I hope so.
So yeah. So thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah. Sure, man.
All right, man.
Love you, dude.
Really too.